Welcome everyone to today's Ministry Builders webinar. My name is Logan Lyles. I'm the Director of Growth here at Business Builders, where we know that for churches and ministries, trying to reach people online can be confusing and expensive. We want to help make it clear and effective. And hopefully today's session is going to give you some content and some action items to be able to do that. I'm joined today by our CEO of Business Builders, Jay Owen. Jay not only has run the marketing agency here for 25 years, but he also serves as the Director of Digital Discipleship at the Church of 1122 in Jacksonville, Florida. Speaking of which, it's about 40 degrees here in Colorado, where I'm based. We actually got a little bit of snow, believe it or not, for anybody in warmer weather. Where Jay's at, it's about 80 degrees in Florida. So just to let you know, the chat is open. So let's kick it off there. Let us know, is it snowing? Are you closer to 40 degrees where I'm at? Or are you closer to 80 degrees with Jay? Let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. Always love to see that. And before we get into the content for today's session, just a few housekeeping items, things to note. This is actually first in a series of 3 Ministry Builders webinars we're going to be doing over the next 4 weeks. So if you're not registered for those future ones, we'll be sharing some info along the way. Always the question with these sort of sessions, will it be recorded? Will I get a copy of the deck? Yes, and yes, an email will go out. So if you can't join us the whole time, don't worry, you will get that. But I want to encourage you, we are going to have some time for some live Q&A, answer specific questions that you have with Jay. So hang around until the end and we'll have some time for that. So chat and Q&A are both open. Already seeing from London to Minnesota to California, all over the place. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jay, and he's going to be leading the content for this session today. And I'll be keeping an eye on the chat and gathering those questions as we go. All right, Jay, over to you, sir.
Thanks, Logan. Hey, y'all. It's great to see everybody. Well, I actually can't see you. I can just see your names on a attendee list, but best we can do for now. Maybe we'll meet in person. Maybe some of us we have met in person. If we have, let me know in the chat, and I'll try to keep a track of that. Logan will be keeping a closer eye on the chat as I go through a presentation deck today. My hope is to help you grow your ministries. And so at the end of the day, after this hour is done, I want to equip you with some ideas, some strategies, and some resources. And then we're going to follow up with those things in the 2 following webinars that we have, not next week, but the week after that, and then one the week after that as well. So I don't want you to miss those. I'm open to any questions along the way. My wife likes to joke that interrupting is my love language, and so I should be okay with people interrupting me. It's a little harder for you to do since you can't actually talk right now on the screen, but that's okay. Just put questions in the chat as we go. Logan will compile those, and I'll do my best to answer as many of those as I can at the end of the call. So as Logan said, I get to wear a lot of different hats. I have built a marketing agency my entire life here in St. Augustine, Florida, called Business Builders, and started when I was 17, been doing that for over 25 years. And about 3 years ago, I got the opportunity to come on staff at our church here in Jacksonville, Florida, called the Church of 1122. We have grown a lot over the last few years from, let's say when I first joined about 3 years ago, we were averaging about 8,000 people a week. We're now averaging about 20,000 people a week in person, plus obviously tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands more online. And so we've implemented a few different things over time there that have worked really well. And I do a lot of individual one-on-one calls with churches. And I thought, you know what, let's just do a webinar series where I can share all this information at once with people live that are watching, those of you here right now, and people later that might be watching this on a recording, so that efficiency-wise, I've got one talking track that I can share with everybody and hopefully be able to help more people that way. So I'm going to jump into a presentation deck. As Logan said, you will get a copy of this at the end. My goal is to help you 10x your church's online reach without spending a dime on ads. We've done this at 1122. We do not currently spend money on online advertising, and we do a lot of this organically. Now, I know that everybody is of different sizes from a church perspective, and these ideas will work for you, whether you are a church of 50 people or you're a church of 50,000 people. The ideas are the same. You just might be able to multiply it a little bit differently based on your resources of team and budget and all those kind of things. That said, I want to make it practical for everybody. So let's go through a few things. As we go, if you have questions, feel free to leave those in the chat, and I'll come back to them at the end as soon as I can. All right, here we go. So the goal for today is to help expand the kingdom. At the end of the day, I believe in the Big C Church, that we're all a part of the same great mission, which is to go and make disciples of all nations. So my hope today is to help church leaders like you grow your online reach, focusing on discipleship and fulfilling what I would call the digital Great Commission. What an incredible opportunity now that we can reach people all over the world who have access to the internet. By leveraging social media strategies and repurposing content, we aim to extend the church's message to reach and disciple more people online. So I'm super excited about that today. The problem, though, is that marketing can be confusing and expensive. Which platform do you use? And, what do you post? And how often do you post? And everybody's trying to give you strategies all the time, especially if you're in the communication role. In fact, it might be an interesting thing to put in the chat. I'd love to hear, what is your role at the church that you're at? Are you an executive pastor? Are you a communications director? Are you in some other role? Let us know in the chat what role you are currently serving in the church. That would be great to know. One of the things that caught me off guard when I first started working vocationally in the church, because I do believe that we're all in ministry. Like I said, my agency is called Business Builders, but we're spinning up this wing called Ministry Builders because we want to help ministries, churches, and nonprofits specifically in ways that help them. And what I've found is while we're all in ministry, there are some unique challenges in the church. The stat that stood out to me more than anything else is this one that I put on the screen, which is that 1 out of 6 people, this is from a Barna study that was done a little while ago, 1 out of 6 people in the United States, I know some of y'all from overseas, so your numbers may vary, who say they go to church, only go to church once a week. Well, what does that mean? It means that those of us who are in ministry have the curse of knowledge. A lot of times we think, well, everybody knows that. We mentioned it the last 2 weeks in a row. The problem is that most people weren't here the last 2 weeks in a row. Now, one of the advantages of being a little bit of a smaller church is it's a little bit easier to physically see who's there and who's not. But in our case, I've got 14 campuses to help lead, plus online ministries. And so I can't physically put eyes on people and know that there. I need to be able to have a better way to reach them. And so how do I use social media to re-engage those people? Because it's not just about reaching new people. It is about that. But it's also about discipling and nurturing the people who already are a part of our churches. So I'm going to give you some strategies to help with that today. I'll give you some real results first, things that have happened at the Church of 1122 where I've had the opportunity to serve over the last few years. When I started, we had about 1,500 people we could text. As of today, we have over 80,000. When I started, we had about 8,000 YouTube subscribers. Right now, we have over 80,000 YouTube subscribers. When I started, we had about 30,000 email addresses. Now we have over 75,000. We were averaging about 200,000 web visits a year. Now we get millions. And so the question becomes, how can I help you? How can we give you some strategies to do the same? Now, look, I get it. Like most churches, the average church in America is less than 150 people. No problem. So take these numbers and just take some zeros off the end. It's the same thing. It's the same thing in agency world. When I get to help other agencies grow their businesses, some are working with $100,000 budgets and some are working with multi-million-dollar budgets. So take a zero off and we can still work through the same result. One of the things that I talk a lot about, and this matters a ton on social media, is a lot of times people use social media as an announcement vehicle. Even internally at the church, we have to fight against this all the time because every ministry, department, and leader goes, hey, we want to put this announcement out on social media so that people will take action. But it's the wrong way to think about social media. We should think about it as a story making, because story is a sense making device. Storytelling helps people connect and understand complex ideas. Now, those of you that are preaching pastors know this. You use it all the time. Jesus did it. He uses parables when he would teach. Why? Because it helped connect ideas to people and make them relevant in their time. Stories illustrate key sermon messages for deeper engagement. And so how do we do that online? Social media is about relationships and storytelling, not just announcements. You can use it for announcements, but it should be a minor percentage. Think less than 20% of your social media posts should be announcements. The rest should really be relational. The reason I say that story is a sense-making device is this. And since the beginning of time, human beings have been telling stories. We told them around campfires, we drew them on cave walls, we wrote them on papyrus, we created the printing press and radio and television and all these mediums to tell story. And story makes you pay attention. You pay attention because it's hardwired into our DNA to do so. So when you're, 1 o'clock in the morning and you've got, one more episode of whatever show you're watching on Netflix and you got to be up at 5, Your brain still says, even though it's completely illogical, I'd like to just watch one more episode, just one more. And I don't know about you, but I have reached the age where even if I decide to watch one more episode, I'm probably going to fall asleep anyway. But story helps connect those ideas. So how do we use that in the context of ministry? I'm going to give you some strategies along the way, and we'll talk about it. So a lot of you have put your titles in the chat. Let us know where you're serving in the church. That's helpful because we can, kind of better diagnose and give some strategies depending on that. So let's keep rolling. Whenever you think about marketing or communication strategy, I like to break it down like this. 3 simple steps. Plan, produce, promote, because who doesn't love a good alliteration? Now, in ministry, we don't typically use words like promote or sell or marketing or brand. I get it. But the idea is the same. How do we get it in front of as many people as possible? Certainly our existing congregations, but also people that are connected to them. And so that's a big piece of the puzzle. How do we get our existing congregation to share things that we post? Because when they share things, guess what happens? Their audience sees it. We want to make it easy for them to invite. We want to make it easy for them to be evangelists. We want to make them easy for them to help them be disciple-making disciples. So when we plan things here at the agency, one of the things that we do is we put together what we call a blueprint. You should do this too. You can do it on your own, or a company like ours can help. So we have a tool we call ministryblueprint.com. And what we do is we sit and plan for the year. We start to understand what is the mission and the vision of the church? What are your core values or your code of conducts? What are the things that matter to you? Now, look, ideally, we're all serving the same king. And we're all generally going after the same mission, which is make disciples who make disciples, to go into all the ends of the earth to do so. And technology is an incredible way to do that. We have the opportunity to multiply a message outside of the physical room where people are sitting. Now, ironically, even though I get to serve over things that are digital and online and all those kinds of things at 1122 and help with other churches as well, I still would rather have people in person if I can. I would rather have all of you. There's well over 100 people on this chat right now live. I'd much rather have you in the room right now. We could ask more questions. We can engage a little bit easier. And who knows, maybe we'll be able to do that. Our church, 1122, is actually hosting a church leaders summit next September of 2025, here in Jacksonville, which is close to the beach, by the way. So y'all should plan to come to that. If you want details, you can go to churchleaderssummit.com. I'll put that in the chat for you, churchleaderssummit.com, and we can actually meet in person. But the blueprint is the starting step. It's laying out the messaging. What is the clear, direct messaging that we want to help get attention and reach more people? Then we'll lay out a wireframe. What I mean by that is just kind of a sketch or a drawing of what the homepage should be. Your homepage of your website is arguably the most important piece of real estate from a marketing perspective and from a communication perspective that you have. And it does need to serve 2 audiences. It needs to serve your current members, for sure, and it needs to serve people who are curious about your church. And one of the things we have to do in ministry is to think about, what would it be like? Most of you on this chat, I would imagine, at some point in your life have probably changed churches. When we changed from our prior church to where we are now at 1122, which is probably 6 or 7 years ago. I've only been on staff for 3 years, but I changed the church 6 or 7 years ago, and it's a big deal. It's a big deal to leave a place and to go somewhere new. And so when somebody comes on our website, do we give them enough information to help them find a location, get an experience of what that looks like? I know we still have a ton of work to do at 1122, big plans of things that we're working on in this area, but it matters a lot. So getting this plan right is really critical. We do that by planning first. I always say you wouldn't build a house without a blueprint. You shouldn't run a marketing campaign without one either. And so ministryblueprint.com is how we do that. If you want help with those things, we would love to help. After we have a good plan, we would need to produce things. 2 primary things. You need a great website, and you need some great videos. And photos for sure. Like that's kind of like the expectation that goes along with it. The beauty of photos is many times you probably have a few people in your congregation who are willing to serve as volunteers and support the ministry and who are great photographers. That can be a huge blessing. to have people who can take great photos, and then you can use those to share. In the coming weeks' webinars, I'm going to share some specific tools for how we store photos, how we use AI to optimize them and search for them, all these kind of things, stuff that we've had to solve for at 1122 I think will be helpful for you. So we plan things, we produce them, a great website and great videos. In coming weeks, I'll talk more about website and what you need to have in that puzzle to make it right. And then lastly, we need to promote it. We need to distribute content across the right platforms to reach your audience, your current audience of people who are members or attendees or congregants, and your prospective audience of their friends, their relationships, or other people in the community who might show up. So we need to plan, produce, and promote. If we get this out of order and we start trying to promote, people call me all the time and they're like, hey, Jay, we need help with our SEO. And I'm like, yeah, but your website's not good. So we don't need to be doing SEO if your website's not good, and your website's not good because we don't have a good plan in place. So we're working backwards. Hey, Jay, we need some help doing some paid ads on social. And I'm like, no, you don't. You need to have a better plan in place to build a better website. Again, at 1122, we've seen that growth without spending any money on ads. It's all organic. Now, maybe I could have done some of it faster with ads, but frankly, 10x in less than 3 years is pretty good without spending money on advertising. So this gets a little nerdy on the marketing side, but I'm going to do my best to try and dig into it here. Also, from time to time throughout this webinar, if you're watching it live, we'll pop up a poll or a quiz. We'd love your feedback on that. It'll help us kind of get a gauge of where you're at. And as we've developed content for future webinars, I can tailor it more to the audience and to the community here because gosh, with the number of people that we've had sign up that are interested in this, I think we could really maybe have a more ongoing thing. For now, we've got 3 webinars planned, but if there's enough feedback and help, I'm happy to help as much as I can. It'll be easier for me to do one big group call a month or so instead of a lot of individual ones. All right, let's talk about this discipleship marketing funnel. Here's the way I think about it. Underlying everything is clear messaging. If you confuse, you lose. And so if we're not clear in our messaging, we have a real problem. Now, what happens at a lot of churches is you typically have somebody who's a leader, who's a pastor, who is, often pretty good at verbal communication because the nature of the job, at least part of the job, and I realize the job of a pastor is a lot more than standing and giving a sermon, but that is a big part of the job. And so if you can stand on a stage and you can present, you can teach a good sermon, you can preach well, you're pretty good at verbal communication. But that doesn't necessarily translate to email, text messaging, websites, social media. And a lot of folks that I've met go, I don't even know what to do with all this stuff. I get it. But the core of all these pieces is written, clear communication. Do we have a clear brand guide, not just from a design and colors and logos standpoint, but from a words standpoint? For example, one of the things that Pastor Joby, who's the lead teaching pastor, Joby Martin at 1122, does really well is he has picked words early on that he repeats over and over and over again. He wouldn't call this marketing, but it's the best marketing arguably that 1122 has ever done. For example, one of the things that we talk about all the time is we ask the question, who is your one more? And your one more is just the person you want to invite, the person you want to hopefully see come to Christ. It could be a friend, a neighbor, a family member. Who is that one more? Write that person's name down. And Pastor Joby has used that one more language from the beginning of the church. And it's so significant because it's how we talk. It's clear messaging. Now, it might not be clear to an outsider who's not been in the church before, but he says it so much, it's super clear. So we need clear messaging that underlays everything. Then we need visual brand identity that's consistent. So you don't have to have the coolest logo in the world. Your logo doesn't need to have some fancy story that tells some intricate tale. Everybody kind of feels like they need to. It really doesn't. After all, I literally work at a church where the name of the church is 1122, which everybody asks, what Bible verse is it? It's not actually a Bible verse. It was based around the start time of a youth service that was at a church that we launched from. That's it. And the logo is just a giant E. So your logo doesn't have to be some fancy thing, but it does need to be consistent because a design builds trust, but words are what connect. We'll talk about that more in a minute. But clear messaging, visual brand identity are the foundation upon which everything else is built. If those things aren't right, we got to get those things right first, and we talk about those in our ministry blueprint. So then you got strangers. I know it might be a little tiny on your screen, but the top of this funnel is a stranger. They don't know who you are or what you do, and they're attracted to you in some way. Okay, they're attracted to you in some way. I'm going to go through some ways in which they're attracted to you in a minute to give you some ideas, but they're attracted to your church in some way. Then they become a visitor. Now, you don't necessarily know who this visitor is. There's two different kinds of visitors that could happen. The visitor could be somebody who's just visiting your website or social media, or watching online, or somebody that physically shows up in person. Now, all of us would rather have somebody that physically shows up in person. I think even the folks online who have identified as online pastors would generally agree with this. We learned this during COVID, right? It is better to be together. It is not good to be alone. I always point out that when God made things in Genesis, he made many things. And he said, it was good, it was good, it was good. And then he says, and he formed man from the dust of the ground. And then it says, it was not good. I don't know, I'm leaving some parts out. It was not good for man to be alone. And so we're meant to be around each other. We're meant to be in community. But if somebody's just a visitor, they walk in, they sit in the back row, we never connect with them. Or worse, they watch an online service, we never connect with them. They visit our website, we never connect with them. We don't know who they are. Well, turns out it's very difficult to disciple people if we don't know who they are. So we need to convert them into connected attendees, connected folks who we know who they are and they know who we are. That's how you have a relationship after all. We got to both know each other. And so there's a lot of ways we can do that, which I'm going to show you in a minute, some specific ideas that we've done at 1122 that have gone really well. So you're going to attract strangers through compelling outreach that inspires curiosity and interest, and you're going to engage visitors with meaningful connections, showing them a path to deeper engagement. We're going to nurture connected attendees towards deeper relationships with the church and its community. Then they're going to commit in some way. That may look different for some of you. Some of you have an official membership process at your church. Some of you may not. For some of you, it may be a requirement. For some of you, it may not. It's going to vary from place to place. But whatever that commitment looks like to be a regular participant in the body at your church. And then ideally, they're going to get involved in different ways. They're going to become givers, hopefully. They're going to serve, hopefully. They're going to be discipled and be disciplers. And then hopefully they're going to invite people, which kind of ties back to bringing strangers into visitors, into connected people. So this funnel of thinking about how do people start, how do they become aware of us to begin with, and how do we nurture them through the process? It turns out that the marketing tools and strategies that I've been doing for the past almost 3 decades are actually super relevant in church. It's the same thing because it's about connecting people with a desired outcome. Now, in business world, we're trying to sell products and services. And I wouldn't go as far as to say we're trying to sell Jesus, but that's because that's a little bit not the way I would want to say it. But at the end of the day, we want people to know who he is and what he's done for them, so they might enter into a relationship with him, or what we would say at 1122, to discover and deepen a relationship with Jesus Christ. How do we do that? This funnel is the way to think about that. So one of the things that people struggle with is content creation, trying to create more and more content. You look like this stressed out, worn out, ready to quit fella over here, versus repurposing content. Multiplying existing content that you have is better than just creating more content. So shift from, it's a mind shift, creating more content to repurposing content effectively. And you can leverage existing sermon content for social media with the help of AI. Now, AI is a hot topic. I love it. I'm into it big time. I got some awesome tools that I use. And on our next webinar, I'm going to spend most of the time talking about that. I'm going to show you specific tools. I'm going to show you how to use those. I'm going to show you how they apply to ministry. I'm going to answer some common objections and fears and concerns about AI in ministry. And so you'll be able to get that content in the next couple of webinars. So make sure you are signed up for that. There's a link in the chat right now that will let you get signed up for that next webinar where we're going to dig specifically into AI, because it is a game changer as it relates to multiplying content. In the business world, one of the biggest problems that we have is creating content. It's a ton of work. It's creating a ton of content is very hard. But in ministry land, it actually can be really simple, because you've got a sermon every single week. And that sermon's somewhere between 20 and 60 minutes of content. Well, we don't need all that. How could we take that content and multiply it, repurpose it, so that we can be this happy guy on the right, kicking our feet at our desk, instead of this stressed out guy over here, or gal, either way. So let's look at a few ways 8 ways to be precise, that people can be attracted to your ministry. I'm going to talk about each one of these briefly. And depending on what kind of interest we have, I'd be happy to even spin up another podcast or another webinar, I should say, in the future to help work through or show you some specific examples. Today, I'm trying to give you like a big bird's eye view of how to think about these things. And then in these following webinars, they're going to be a lot more tactical, where I'm going to dig in and show you specific tools, show you how to physically do things. Because some of y'all are going to want to be able to do some of this stuff yourself, and some of y'all are going to want some help getting some of these things done. Either one of those, I want to empower you to do that. And some of you are also going to do nothing, which I hope is none of you actually, but inevitably when you got a group this big, that's just the nature of it. So resources and services. This is a huge one. Remember, one of the things I talked about was how we went from having 1,500 people I could text to 80,000 people I could text. Well, how did I do that? Well, one, I recognize that I have a distinct advantage in some ways that we're already a lot of people in the room. We were already averaging 8,000 or 9,000 people in the room, but I could only text 1,500 of them. You want to know why? Because the way that we were communicating for people to text in was when they wanted to take action. So think back to that funnel a little bit, and it's kind of the lower section where somebody's already committed and engaged. I want them to serve. I want them to get baptized. I want them to give. I want them to get engaged in some way. I want them to, whatever the thing is, the next step in their discipleship journey that I'm trying to encourage them to do, we would only ask them to text in or scan a QR code when we want them to take an action. Well, guess what? Most people don't want to take an action. Most people aren't ready to take an action. And so how do we create a resource or a tool that allows them to be engaged before they're ready to take action? And the answer is we just give them resources. You go back to multiplying content. So the first thing we did was we were going through the book of Psalms, and we had a series that was pretty long over the summer, and it was 150 days. Well, it turns out there's 150 books in Psalms, chapters, I should say. And I said, what if we presented people with this idea? A lot of people struggle to read their Bible consistently. And when they do, they don't know what to read. Well, what if, as a church, we just all read it together? Now, even if I say we're going to read it together, it's easy to forget. We all get tied up with things. So what we want to do is we want to come alongside you and help you. And so if you'll just text the word Psalms to 441122, y'all don't do that. I mean, you can if you want to, but you'll just get text for the next 150 days about the book of Psalms. You will get every single day a short verse of the book of Psalms and a link that takes you to a website that allows you to listen to or read that particular book or that particular chapter in Psalms. Well, guess what? We added thousands of people to that text message thread because we just encouraged them by giving them a resource. Now I can communicate with all those people. I couldn't communicate with them before, at least not via texting. And texting is one of the most direct, most accessible ways to reach somebody. Now, you can't overdo it, because if you do, you'll end up with people unsubscribing. I know y'all probably get way too many texts, especially as I'm recording this. It's right in the middle of this political season. Some of y'all that watch this recording, thankfully that will all be done. And so we'll just keep going and focus on other things that matter. So giving them resources in services. How can we multiply content? Next week, or not next week, the week after next, when we do this webinar, depending on when you're watching this, I'm going to go through and really talk about some AI tools that I've used, and I'll show you exactly how I've used some of these specifically. So you, those do-it-yourselfers out there, or maybe folks who don't have the budget or the resources to hire an agency like ours yet, no problem. I want to give you tools to help you, and we'll do that. And then the following webinar, I'm going to focus on email and text messaging specifically. Those matter a ton. I'm going to give you some specific resources there. So this is my first and favorite idea, which is just tie along to the service, tie along to the series that you're already doing in church. Give them resources to download, and ask them to download via either a text-in number, which is my preference, or a QR code. We use a texting service called Clearstream. I'll dig into those a little bit more later as well and talk about tools on our next webinar. But I love Clearstream, great texting platform. And QR codes are okay too. It depends on what your people are used to. You might even test both and see which one gets better engagement, because at the end of the day, what really matters is who's actually using them. How do we else get attention? We can get attention via social media. Utilizing social media effectively with compelling content that sparks curiosity and engagement. It's a discipleship tool as well. I'll tell you one thing that our social media lead did. She was super smart. She said, I want to build relationships with people. And so every time somebody would follow one of our social media channels, she would message them and say, hey, thanks for following our church's channel, or thanks for following our pastor's channel. We have one social media channel for Pastor Joby and one for the Church of 1122. I think that's also a really good strategy. One for the lead pastor, one for the church. And I was visiting a church out in California this week, and the lead pastor, very large church, thousands of people, super compelling, great preacher. And he's like, look, I just don't want to be one of these celebrity preachers. And I said, look, man, I get it. And at the same time, don't you want the message that you're preaching to go to as many people as possible? Well, of course I do. Could it be that you're actually not being a good steward of your resources by not sharing these things online? And he's like, yeah, I guess maybe that is true. And so, using social media for both the pastor, lead pastor ideally, and the church itself can be really helpful. Multiplying content, sharing sermon resources. I'll dig into some specifics of those in just a moment. Podcasts. Podcasts are a great idea. The easiest, lowest hanging fruit on a way to do podcasts. And we may even build out a strategy for this for ministries at some point because I think it might be helpful. But the best way to do a podcast is just do a follow-up to the sermon. So we have a podcast, 1122, called Deepen with Pastor Joby Martin. And it's basically him plus another guest pastor or another guest from this relates to the service or the topic that he's preaching on. And then one of our other pastors just asks questions. So he sits in the service, takes notes, and then after the service, they just go straight in and record the podcast so it's fresh. And the idea is, hey, what questions people might ask that we can just talk about. So you don't have to script it. You don't have to build a big plan out. And look, we are fortunate. We have a podcast studio. We can do cool videos and make it look great, but you don't have to start there. You know, when I started my podcast years ago in business land, I had one kind of crappy mic that I just set in the middle of the room, and it sounds horrible. But frankly, regardless of what you think about him or not, Joe Rogan's the #1 podcast in the world by a long shot. Go and listen, go into YouTube and just search for Joe Rogan first podcast episode. And depending on how YouTube's filtering work, you may or may not see it, but it is horrible. The video is horrible. The audio is horrible. The content's not structured well. He just started it and got it going. You can start with audio only, although I love video. It's a huge double-edged sword on podcast land. But if your church is not doing a podcast right now, it's such a great opportunity to disciple your people more and to reach more people, because your people will then share that content with other people. And sometimes that content can be a little bit easier to get into than somebody who's not used to listening to sermons. Okay. Press releases. This is not really my world historically. I'm not a PR person, but when something really big happens at your church, you can write a press release, which next webinar, I will teach you how to do that with AI, so you don't have to do a whole lot of writing yourself, and then send that out to a lot of networks. Well, the reason that matters is you can get basically free press. People pick up an article about something that you've done in your area, and then they share a story about it. We had a big thing that happened last year. Every year we do a beach baptism at the Church of 1122. And last year, or this year actually, during the summer, we baptized over 1,600 people in one day, in one location. It was wild. Unbelievable. In the online line, I got to baptize myself over 100 people in one day. It was crazy. The stories were amazing. Well, we could have just done that amongst our church and nobody else heard about it, but instead we wrote a press release and sent it out, and a bunch of other publications picked that up, including CBN, and published it. Well, then more people find out about it. And it's not just about finding out about our church. It's not about that. It's about how do we connect people with resources to help people discover and deepen a relationship with Jesus Christ. So those top 4 are really big. These are as well. Let's go to the 5th one here. Google My Business Setup. Now, I know that you don't have a business, you have a church, but Google doesn't delineate, so it still calls it a business. And here's the way that it works. There's a tool called Google My Business. It's free. You can literally just go to google.com/business. I think that's what it is anyway. And on there, you can just update your church's location. You can add photos. You can add links to your services. You can add links to times when you're available. Really a big deal. And it's super easy to update. It's free. That's another thing. So if you're not going in there and updating that, Logan's putting links in the chat, by the way, for things that I mention along the way without giving you links on the screen. So make it a little bit easier. So thanks, Logan, for that. And Tyler for pitching in as well. Appreciate y'all. He said it's called Google Business Profile now. These things, they're constantly changing, you know? But anyway, you get the idea. So go to Google, set up your business account, even though I know it's a church, and add some photos. add some information on there, and more people will see you in the map when they search for things. When they search for church near me, boom, all of a sudden your church is showing up, and it was free. Free to set up. Can't beat it. Also, people talk about search engine optimization, so I'll jump one over and talk about search engine optimization. This is going to change more and more in AI world, but the content on your website is the biggest thing that drives search engine optimization. And so what we want to do is have content on our website that people are searching for, answers to questions, answers to things about your area that people might search for. And it can be incredibly valuable. And then have some downloadable resources. When people come on your website and they're curious about something, and you can just multiply this stuff that you had in the service that was a resource, make that a downloadable item. And you can just make it available for free, no problem. But I prefer, in many cases, to make it in exchange for an email address. We're not asking them to pay for anything, but we are asking for their email address because then we can follow up with them. Again, we can't disciple people that we don't know. And then lastly, YouTube. At 1122, one of the things that we do every week is we share testimonials, incredible stories by video. But before I was there, we were just letting those videos die on a Sunday. What I mean by that is they were played on a Sunday and then never seen again. They weren't put anywhere online. And it was just because we just hadn't done it. It just takes time and resources, and I get it. And so we started putting these things online. Well, now, guess what? Hundreds, thousands, some cases hundreds of thousands of people are watching these testimonials, and it's much lower hanging fruit than going and watching a 50-minute sermon. So putting your content on YouTube is a really big deal. And then using AI, which we'll do in the next webinar, to help title that sermon, to help you create content for it. The description in YouTube and adding links to it matters a lot. So we'll talk about that in more detail on the next webinar. All right, so those are 8 ways to get more attention for your content. And look, if you're not doing any of these things right now, no problem. Pick the lowest hanging fruit for you based on your current situation, your abilities, team, resources. Pick the one that's the lowest hanging fruit. Google Business Setup, anybody can do, and it takes a couple hours at most to really fill that out and make it great. So maybe you want to start there. You don't feel like you have to do all these things today. That's where people get stuck. Just pick the lowest hanging fruit, make a list, and go, hey, in 12 months from now, I'd like to be doing all these things. So what needs to be true between now and then to make that happen? Repurposing sermons for social media. I've got some incredible tools that I will show you on the next webinar. I know I keep talking about next webinar. It's because I want you to sign up for it and come back for that and get some of this tactical stuff. If you got other team members or even interns who are more tactical, boots on the ground kind of people, you'll want to invite them to that next webinar too, because I can help them hopefully learn some of these things. Taking sermon clips, creating short clips, great tools for that now, creating key quotes and graphic cards, and then discussion prompts. These are all easy, low-hanging fruit for social media so that you can multiply your existing content in a way that people will actually watch it and pay attention. Okay, Alexandra in the chat said Google Ads offers a $10,000 grant. That's true. I should have put that in that slide deck. Good call out. Thanks for saying that. It's completely free to set up. We have helped plenty of people set those up before as well. I don't know why I didn't put that in my presentation deck, but it is a powerful tool to help advertise holidays and events. So Alexandra, thanks for calling that out in the chat. Great point. On platform selection and mastery, here's one thing that I say, you got to focus first. If you're not on any social media platforms yet, maybe you think social media is evil. I probably agree with you. And so the question becomes, though, how do we take something that was meant for evil and turn it into good? That is the business that God is in after all. And so hopefully he will allow us to come alongside him in his work and help with these things. So focus first. Pick the platform that you or your church are most comfortable with. Ideally, it's where your people are. And so what I mean by that is you can do some basic demographic searching, go into ChatGPT if you want to and just say, hey, based on our congregation, which is this age group, which social media platform would be most relevant? For example, the younger generation is more likely to be on TikTok. Kind of the older millennials like myself would be on Instagram. And then our parents who are in their 60s or 70s are likely on Facebook. Now, there's some variation to that. There's crossover across all the platforms. And there's new platforms popping up all the time, but don't feel like you have to do all of them. Just pick the best one. My favorite personal one is Instagram right now. As I said, my age group is probably based around that. I just think it's the easiest to work with, too, for churches and ministries to share fun ideas. and with less censoring than a lot of the other channels. So know your audience of the major platforms, where your audience at, and quality over quantity. And don't just be blasting out stuff to be blasting out stuff because you feel like you got to post every hour. You really don't. A couple of times a week is fine. Now, if you can post every day and you have something valuable and interesting to post, even if it's just pictures of people at the church, great. Um, Having good content, though, like I was talking about, either having a staff photographer, which most churches are not big enough to have a full-time staff photographer, or lean on um, your volunteer team to help, because a lot of people would love to help with that. But you just got to create a system where that serve staff, is what we call them, or volunteers, can participate in the ministry. All right, I got a handful of slides left. I'm gonna leave some room at the end for questions. So if you have questions along the way, or things you're curious about, ideas you think I should talk about that I've not mentioned, some of y'all had some ideas that I've not shared, which are great. So feel free to put those in the chat. Put your questions in the chat. Logan will help compile those. He'll come back on the camera at the end, and we'll dig in. I got a few more slides we'll go through before we get there. So your website. Let's talk about that for a minute. Your website is the center of your marketing funnel, and what I mean by that is that clear messaging is your foundation. Your website, your email list, and your texting list are owned property. What I mean by that is nobody can take it offline or change how it's displayed. Back in the day, for example, if you had a Facebook page for a business or a church or a ministry or whatever, and somebody liked that page, and then you shared content on that page, everybody who liked it would see it. And so for a season, and some of y'all remember this, we were all obsessed with getting people to like our Facebook pages. Why? Because when they did, it was almost like subscribing to an email list. But then somewhere along the way, Facebook said, we got to make some money. And so then they basically changed a lot of the nonprofit business pages that are not individuals to kind of a pay-to-play model. Now, it doesn't mean you can't get organic reach. You can, but it's a little bit harder than it used to be. And so you don't own that property. Your website, though, you own it. Your email list, you own it. Your texting list, your contact list, you own it. So we want to build those things. Clear messaging is the foundation. We talked about that. It needs to be clear and consistent across all platforms. Strong brand identity on your website. And I'll just show you real quick. I'll jump over to 1122's website, which we're constantly improving. But clear, strong message, a movement for all people. At Church of 1122 is a movement for all people to discover and deepen a relationship with Jesus Christ. And there's two main things people want to do. They want to watch sermons. That's typically people who already come here. And they want to find a location. There's a picture of Pastor Joby. He's actually in our prison ministry here in this photo. Big call to action, really make it really easy for people to give because we don't pass a plate at 1122. All giving is done online through the app or through giving boxes. And then you just scroll down, current series that we're focused on, current discipleship journey, big, bold, actual photos. I'm not using stock photos on the church website. And then ways they can experience, watch on demand, watch in person, or watch it live in one day, 2 hours and 34 minutes, 21 seconds. Really easy ways to connect there. Movement for all people, kids, students, 1825, which is our college ministry, special needs, find a way that connects for you, and then ways to take your next step. So super clear, super big, really clear connection points. That's what I want on a church website. And the other platforms should be one-way traffic. What you'll notice on our website at 1122, and any website that I would build for another church, we're not linking back to social media platforms. Social media, Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or the rest, they have one objective. It is to keep people on those platforms as long as physically possible. And what I want to do is I want them to help them take their next step, whatever that may be. Engage in a disciple group, register to get baptized, sign up to serve, give online, watch a service, share a service with a friend, download a resource, something like that. I don't want to send them back to social media because guess what? They're just going to get lost. Me too. Me too. So your website, extremely important to get this right. Some folks need to hand it off to an intern or to a neighbor down the street. And look, I appreciate that because I used to be that neighbor down the street. I started building websites when I was 12. So I appreciate people who are willing to give me work. That said, you want to get this right. You want your website to be right. And so when we build websites for ministries or for businesses, we take it really seriously. We want to get a layout that works really well for the intended audience, that helps them take the next steps and actions that you want. Design builds trust, but words connect. So it needs to be visually appealing, and it also needs to be words that actually connect with the audience. That makes all the difference. And keep it simple. People aren't trying to read a website in detail. They're trying to skim it, okay? A couple of quick win strategies. Identify impactful moments in sermons, 3 to 4 moments from existing sermons that can be repurposed for social media. And you say, Jay, I don't have time to edit all that. It can take a lot of time to find the right clips and to download them. No problem. Next webinar, I'm going to give you some specific tools that will help you do that almost automatically. You can take what would have been hours or days or weeks of work and turn it into minutes. We're doing this all over the place, both with ministries and with businesses, and it's incredible. Plan ahead. What is your plan for what you're trying to post online? And don't be scared to use templates. A tool like canva.com, if you're not using something like that, can just be incredibly valuable. A lot of times people in the creative or design space get a little like, I don't know, sensitive about using things like AI or Canva or whatever else. But look, these tools are built to get things done. And so I want you to find the best resources to make that happen. So you got 3 options right now. One is you can do nothing. You can just get off this webinar and be like, well, that's some information that I'm going to do nothing with. That's not a good idea. It's the worst option. 2 is you can do it yourself. A lot of you are not in a position where you can hire somebody else budget-wise. Totally get that. No problem. That's why I'm doing these, so I can help as many people as possible along the way. And you can do it yourself. So we're going to send you this deck afterwards. And in the coming weeks, we'll be sending you some lists of tools and resources I think you'll find really helpful. And lastly, you could have us help you. I'll be happy to do that too. You can check out ministryblueprint.com. There'll be a link to that in the chat, and Logan can help answer any follow-up questions on those if you have them. But our hope there is for certain ministries who are at a place where they're really to really take things to the next level, and they want professional help to get it right. We'd love to do that. While I serve on the staff at the Church of 1122, Ministry Builders is kind of a side project that we're working on here that I think is going to make a big impact in the kingdom. We've already helped quite a few other churches, all of varying sizes, get these things right. Okay, I've got about 14 minutes left on this call. I would love to take any questions that you have. So Logan's going to join us back on camera here. I'm going to stop the share. And let's see what kind of questions we have. Logan, I wasn't watching the chat in detail, but do we have any that are already in there that I can answer, or should we
Yeah,
ask
we'll
folks to submit
definitely
some more?
We definitely do. The first one I want to tackle just came up here as we were talking about the website being central to the marketing hub for the church. We were talking about clear messaging and clear, compelling brand identity. Frank Howell, Frank, thanks for your question. Asked, can you give us a definition of what you mean by brand identity? What would good versus bad look like there, maybe?
Well, I'll tell you what's bad is me using insider language like brand identity that people don't understand what it is. So that's a good example of what's bad. Let me just break it down really simple. When I say brand identity, what I mean are just the basics of how things look. So for example, you would have a logo, and that logo could be in multiple forms. So for example, I had somebody message me today and say, hey, do you have the 1122 logo that I can use? I'd like to make something for Pastor Joby. I said, no problem. I'll send it to you. And I said, do you want the big E or do you want the full one that says 1122? And they're like, just send me both. So that's an example. We got 2 different pieces, a big E, and we got one that's the full name.
Yep.
Then we have colors that go along with it. What are the colors that we use at the church? Black, gray, red, white, whatever those colors are, they're specifically defined. And then what fonts do we use? These are the fonts that we use in our print materials. They're the fonts that we use on our website. So when you pull up a journal that we might print and you pull up the website, there's continuity of both across both of those things. It's true in business, it's true in ministry. We want to create consistency. When people have shirts that come out, like Logan's got a business builder shirt on right now, we want that consistency to look the same, that we use that same anvil all over the place. Now we have different versions of how we say ministry builders or business builders, but that anvil is consistent. And so that's what I mean when I say brand identity.
Yep. Awesome. Great question. Thanks for keeping us honest, Frank. Tyler had a good one. Thoughts on live streaming playing into the overall digital strategy for your church?
Yeah, great question. There's all kinds of like theological debate over whether live streaming is church or isn't. I'm not trying to get into that today. That'd be another call for a pastor's group, which would be a lot of fun. I'd be into that, talking about that too. But specifically, should we do live stream or not? Yes. A lot of people didn't prior to COVID. And then all of a sudden they realized, oh, we should probably do this. Now, like I said, I'd rather have people in person if I can. There's varying strategies on live streams. If you look at somebody like Life Church, or even like Elevation Church, those are both probably two of the bigger names in online church world. They tend to stream all the time. Specifically, Life Church, it's like if you go on their website, there's a live service happening in like an hour. Now, it's really a replay most of the time, but they do have live chat support. At 1122, we've taken the position that if we're live in the room, we're live online. So it truly is live for us. If we're live in the room, we're live online. Now, depending on your technology stack, sometimes it's easier and better just to play a replay of the service. Maybe you can't actually be live because of some technology constraints around streaming or your internet connection where you're at, or just the tools that you have. No problem. Start by recording it and then play it back online. On YouTube, you can even premiere a video as if it's brand new, because it is brand new. So that's a way to do it. One more thing I didn't talk about today. I actually encourage people, and we've seen huge growth at 1122 with this as it relates to YouTube. A lot of people don't um, put their sermons on YouTube as the primary channel. I actually think that's a bad idea. That's how it was done at 1122 prior. We had things on Vimeo and things on YouTube. Now it all goes through YouTube. So if you're on our app, it's playing the video from YouTube. If you're on our website, it's playing it from YouTube. If you go to YouTube, it's playing it from YouTube. We still keep a backup in case YouTube shut us down someday for some reason. But the reason I want that is YouTube's like a snowball. So as that thing goes, it's more and more. So all that said about live stream, I'm still generally of the position, based on the data that I've seen, that on-demand video matters more. The reason I say that is more people will watch the on-demand video because that's how our culture is structured. Um, but if it's live, I would encourage you to have live hosts, people that can chat. We usually have a team lead who's on staff, and then they build out a volunteer team to help answer questions, pray with people, connect them to their discipleship resource. So I'm big into having those live chats as well.
Awesome. Great stuff there, Jay. There's a question from Jeff, actually a couple of questions from Jeff Knott. I hope I'm getting your name right there, Jeff. He was saying, we started here talking about advancing the kingdom, and then we shifted to talking a good bit about getting people to our church and our ministry. Jay, how do you suggest pastors, communication directors think about how are they helping, water seeds that someone else, might harvest, as well as serving their local community, especially as we're talking about online, where you could reach people both locally and, anywhere in the world at the same time?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, Look, it's kind of like uh, how many talents am I, or is our church?
Mhm.
God gives different people different resources and different moments in time. And I think that we should use all of our time, talents, gifts, and abilities to the best of our ability to reach as many people as we possibly can. And the question is, it's like for whose glory? I mean, now we can get to theology, but it's for His glory. It's for the kingdom of God, for sure. It is not for the Church of 1122 or Pastor Joby Martin. In fact, when I first joined the church, because I've been in the private sector my whole life from a vocational perspective, I had a couple people kind of ask me questions about, well, do you think that Pastor Joby is just using you to help promote him or promote his book launches or something like that? Because he's written 3 books. And I said, no. And I've said this to him at his face, otherwise I wouldn't say it live on a webinar. But I said, I'm using him. I'm using Joby Martin to promote the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's how I see it. And so at the end of the day, though, like we all run the ministries that we run. And if we can help plant and equip other churches, praise God. I mean, one of our goals at 1122 is to plant over 1,000 churches in 10 years. And I think we're at 500 or 600 right now around the world. They're not 1122s. They're just local representations of the body of Christ. And so I'm into that big time. And I think that especially on social media, when we're sharing clips of sermons, it's not even necessarily about us. It's about the gospel. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, good stuff there, Jay. There was one here. It didn't go into the Q&A. It was in the chat. Okay, I'm not going to try and pronounce your first name, so forgive me. But one of our attendees, Jay, said, "I know you'll talk about this next time in greater detail, but could you name one or two of the AI software that you found useful, especially for content repurposing?" So maybe a preview of
Sure.
one or two of those tools.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still like a junkie for chat. I should probably shouldn't say junkie on church call, but for a chat GPT, just the good old fashioned like paid version, $20 a month is worth every penny. It's like having a full blown copywriter with you. So I use that probably the most. I also use Claude.ai. If you've not seen that before, it's an incredible tool. I think it's a little bit of a better writer than ChatGPT, and it's better at diagnosing large documents. So, for example, if you have like um, notes from your sermon, for example. I could drop those notes in there and ask it specific questions to create resources from those notes, and it does a really great job. There's some church specific ones that I've played with and like, and I'll demo some of these. One is church.tech. I know the guys over there, good folks, doing some really cool stuff. Another one's called Sermon Shots. Both of those are great tools, and we'll dig into these specifically next week. I'll show you how I use them and how we use them. But those are a few that I really love off the top of my head.
Love it. All right. Question from Erica. Erica, thank you for this one. She was curious, anyone else using Google Events or updates in the Google business profile? I guess, what are your thoughts beyond getting set up there? If someone does do the Google business profile setup, Jay, what are some of the ways that they could use that ongoing, if they do knock that out as one of the, first low-hanging fruit, as you mentioned?
Yeah, I'm into it. Anything that you can put into Google a business profile setup, the better. The more, the better. So, what I encourage people to do when it comes to technology and tools like this, just be curious. You're not going to mess it up. Just get in there, look at all the different options that it has. So, if it's got a place to post events and you've got an event coming up you want to share, put it in there. Google wants to share that with people when they're asking questions about things. There's another great tool that I love as it relates to events. Not that anybody asks, but it was kind of related to that. It's called addevent.com. I know I'm throwing a lot of tools here. Like I said, I have a little bit of a problem with signing up with a lot of tools. Addevent.com, addevent.com. If I was smart, I'd make these affiliate links, but for now, I'll just say them out loud and hopefully they're helpful. Um, and that's a really cool tool for setting up events and letting people add it to their calendars. We've done that on quite a few things that are big event, big momentum things that we want to track. And it lets me see how many people added it to their calendar and it lets them put it on their calendar. Because remember, one of the things I said was I want people to be coming back. I want them showing up. So it's a top of mind thing too. If I can get it on their calendar, it's showing up on their social media, it's showing up in their email, it's showing up in their text message. Guess what? Those people are more likely to come back to church. In fact, I'm convinced, although it's hard to prove with data, that over the past handful of years at 1122, it's not just that the church has grown. It certainly has, but it's also that people are coming to church more often. So instead of coming one every 6 weeks, what if we bump that to once every 4 weeks? What does that do? What if we bump once every 3 weeks? What if it was every other week? It's gonna be unlikely to get an average of every week for a really large church, but gosh, if I can bring that number down, we're making huge tracks on discipleship and relationship with people.
Yeah, it goes back to one of the things you said at the very beginning. Most people, at least in the US, are going to church less than once a month. And like you said, if we're only saying something, on Sunday, then we're missing a big portion of our congregation to get
That's
that
right.
message.
And
Uh,
Erica, great point on
yeah,
the
yeah,
data. It's really nice to have that data from ad events because you can see how many people have added to their calendar. And look, just because somebody added to the calendar doesn't mean they're actually going to show up. Especially when it's mostly we're not doing paid events. People are more likely to show up to a paid event, and we're almost never doing paid events. So there's a reality that if 500 people RSVP, they might not. They probably won't all show up. I mean, same thing with this webinar. I think we had 400 people sign up, and not that many people actually show up. That's totally okay. They'll get the recording. But that's pretty normal in person events too.
yeah. And same, yeah, exactly, same sort of thing here. Um, all right, here is, I think we got time for another question or two. How do you go about building relationships with publishing firms for PR and press releases? Do you often have to pay for those, or are they published at no cost?
Yeah, great question. There are some tools out there which I don't have them handy, so I'd have to get them and send them in a follow-up, which maybe I can include links to some of these tools that we talk about in a follow-up email to everybody if that's helpful. Because
Okay.
there are a few free tools out there that help you push press releases out. That said, if it's really a valuable, like a super big thing that you want to push, there are some other tools that allow you to pay a little bit, think a couple $100 probably per press release, that are worth doing. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars a month to get these things out. And just because you send them out doesn't mean they're going to get published, but it's the only way to get them published in some of those scenarios. Also, I would develop relationships with local folks in your area. Ask your congregations, anybody who works for a local news station or a local channel, And even, other things, let's say you have something big coming up locally or even nationally that you're doing. Maybe you've got an event that people could come to, or maybe you're launching a book or something like that. Getting on other people's podcasts is a really big deal. Looking for other podcasts that you as a pastor or someone on your team could be a guest on to talk about those things can be really helpful in getting the word out these days.
Mhm. Stuff. All right, just moving to the next question here. I think this was a follow-up from Tyler, who asked a good question about live streaming earlier. What can we do with our live stream if tech is not a barrier to help make the connection with folks? How do you think about, people tuning into live streaming, kind of
Yeah.
urging them to take that next action, as you were talking about earlier, Jay?
Yeah, and he might also be talking about like the disconnect between being in the room versus being on the
Hmm.
stream. I mean,
Yep.
there's a lot of different strategies I've seen on this in various churches. So some of them actually have a totally separate live stream. I've seen churches who literally build like a separate worship set, even a separate message in some cases for the online audience. We've not taken that tact, and I actually don't. I'm not saying it's wrong. You do whatever you want, but I don't think it's the best tact. We think of it in our case as a window into the room, basically. And so, what I want from our live stream is to make it feel as much like they're physically there in the room as I can. Um, and then we also supplement and tag onto that ideas with an online host. So our online pastor at 1120, his name's Dan, great guy. He actually, him and his wife are co-hosts many times for clips that will run before and after the service to directly talk to the audience. And then I think pastors, who are live streaming, need to keep in mind who they're talking to. It's easy if you've only ever talked in the room to not think about every now and then look at the camera and go, hey, and I know a lot of y'all are watching this on replay, or a lot of you may be watching live on now. It makes a
Yeah.
huge difference, especially if you have people sign up for things. Last things, and we're out of time. If you have people sign up for things and you know where they're from, and being like, hey, Jim from Oregon, sent us a message last week and said, blah blah blah. That can be
Yeah.
really valuable. We'll get emails in from people, and Pastor Joby will go up on stage and go, I got this email from Samantha in Ohio, and she said,
Mhm.
and that encourages that engagement online and makes them feel a part of the community, because our tack has basically become, look, if you raise your hand and say, hey, I need help, I want to be discipled, we're going to do whatever we can to make that happen.
Mhm. Yeah. I really like that tactical tip of engaging people, calling people, out by name, not calling people out, but, giving them a
Right.
shout out and speaking to them directly. I've talked with other folks who have grown successful YouTube channels, and they say, that's a great way to, bring those raving fans into the fold. Hey, we should be doing that with our church's online ministry as well. We can kind of take that same tactic and apply it here. Well, everybody, thank you so much for all the engagement. Great questions. We got some good information in the polls throughout the conversation. Hopefully, this was kind of a good scene setter for you, giving you some ideas and overall strategy how to think about your church's online presence. As we mentioned, we're going to be skipping next week, but then we're going to be back to back the following 2 weeks, same time, 4 p.m. Eastern. I dropped the links in the chat there a couple times throughout, but they're there at the bottom now. So make sure you grab those, register for those. We'll be going deeper into the AI tools for content repurposing. It's just amazing to me. There are no more consistent content creators out there than pastors who prep a 45-minute or depending, substantial presentation in their sermon every week. And so we've got so much fodder to be able to get that out. And we're going to be talking about some AI tools you can use, whether you've got a large staff or a small staff, to accelerate that and get the message out there further. And then the follow-up session on growing your text and email list, because you want to be able to consistently communicate with those folks who aren't there every Sunday or tuning in to the live stream. So thank you so much for the chat, everyone. You can also learn more at ministryblueprint.com in how we help, and be looking out for an email. We'll also have a survey where you can chime in. What sorts of things would you like us to cover in the fourth, fifth, sixth session in this Ministry Builders series? So thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks,
See
y'all.
you.